welcome to Alison Petty Coaching, a conversation on. I'm Alison, and this is my guest today, Vipan Maini. Welcome.
Morning.
Morning.
Great to meet you again.
Again, yes. We haven't known each other very long, have we?
Only about 2 or 3 weeks. We've sort of been chatting almost daily, though, haven't we?
I think so. Yeah. So we just to explain how we met. Well, we've met through a couple of different people. So somebody from your side who's brought you into a collaboration, somebody from my side who's brought me into collaboration, and now we all seem to be heading on a really exciting coaching path together. But yes, we met a couple of weeks ago and had a very long conversation about life and things. And it occurred to me very quickly that you would be a great person to have on for this podcast, YouTube video conversation. So we're going to be talking today about adversity and overcoming adversities, because as we both realized in our conversation, that was a very common theme between the two of us. As it is with most humans in life, there's usually something that you can look back and say, that was a really difficult time, but I've come through it and now I'm here. So I'm going to let Vipan introduce himself. He is a fellow coach of mine, specializing in resilience, but other things as well. So I will let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your coaching work and what you're passionate about.
Gosh, okay. That's thanks for the build-up.
Let
me. I'm not sure I can live up to that, but anyway, I'll give you a shortened version of a bit about myself. So I guess life has been quite straightforward up until the 40s, my mid 40s, early 40s, I guess. I'd always been, I had a great role. Fitness has always been really important to me. So I've been training fitness wise, so lots of exercise, gym work. So I always thought I was pretty looking after my health was just a matter of just going to the gym every other day. And I thought, yeah, that's what they used to say to you. You've got to exercise and that will ensure that you don't get ill. Anyway, so when I was at work, I got really ill, actually. I had a heart attack finishing a gym session, strangely enough. And that was the start of a completely different trajectory for my life, Alison. And even though and it's funny how people have different views of you. So I got admitted into hospital on the Saturday, and with a suspected heart attack. And the first thing, everyone think they look at you because I'd got my gym gear on, and everyone thinks, oh, you've just got you. I think when there's lots of people get admitted with suspected heart attacks, and then they make these assumptions. Even doctors and nurses make assumptions. They look at you and think, oh, it's not. You've just overdone it in the gym. And so I spent all Saturday being told that. And the first time I knew I was having it was a heart attack was when I insisted on, I was a very bad patient. So when I had to stay overnight, and I didn't want to go and, can I say the word pee? I just did. So I insisted. I'm a very stubborn man, and I've been called a donkey many times, but a mule. So I wouldn't pee in the bowl, whatever they gave you. So I had to insist on going and walking to the toilet. And the nurses got really irate. And in the end, I had to sign a waiver saying, if anything happens to me while I was walking to the bathroom, that's my fault. So anyway, the nurse at 3 o'clock in the morning got so fed up. She said, do you know what? She says, I've just had the results back. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she actually said, you have had a heart attack. Okay. And you could die any moment. So that was the first time I knew about it. The nurse just told me there and then like that. And that was phenomenal for me. It was a nightmare, frankly. Anyway, end up having even then when the surgeons opened me up, so that was another issue. So on the Monday morning, they took me into surgery, and what it was, it's quite amazing. So nowadays, when you have a heart, when they look at you, they can do it when you're still conscious. So they stick a tube down the side. It was down my arm, and so they had this massive screen. So it's like going to the cinema, and we talk about how we love movies. This is a real life movie about yourself. So here we go. I was watching myself, and you can see they're looking, rummaging around, and the senior surgeon wasn't even watching because he said to me, 99% it's not a heart attack, but we've got to do our job. He said. So he was doing his paperwork, and he let his registrar operate on me. And then within 5 minutes, the registrar says something to the surgeon. The surgeon suddenly stops what he's doing, and he goes, "You are the 1 in 100 cases where I am
Wow.
wrong." And he goes,
Wow.
and he goes, not only that, he says, from the state of your heart, it looks like you've had a couple of heart attacks before.
Wow.
So this is all amazing, um, amazing. I was in shock. I couldn't all take it all in anyway. So bottom line was, so they then had to, well, they did their best. They put 5 stents in me. So I had 5 stents that time. So that that was amazingly not traumatic. It was just I couldn't it didn't sink in what that meant anyway. So, but not only for me, I had amazing consequences because my children will witness my first heart attack. So it goes on. It's not you that gets ill. It's also the impact to your family. So my children were 5 and 4 at the time, 4, 4 and 5, something like that. Very, very young. So it was all very difficult for them to understand what was going on. So anyway, so I get out of hospital, and then they give you all these medications. So you think, okay, get back on the treadmill of getting of recovering. So and I wanted to prove people wrong because I thought I was fit. So and work. So this was an issue. So I go back to work after 6 months. But again, these are issues of how your employer treats you and what happens, and that's another podcast. But it didn't go terribly well
Yeah.
at work, and it got to a point. It got really stressful for me. Anyway, bottom line was I ended up having a second heart attack within 18 months. So I guess that again puts your life on another trajectory because thereafter, and I had to have another stent so that to cure that blockage. So there, I end up being. The bottom line is I have got major coronary artery disease. Is how they summarize my condition, caused by undue stress. So it's nothing. That's the other thing to tell you, I guess. It's nothing to do with what I've done to my body. I've never taken steroids. I guess the second time I got into hospital, the first thing they asked me was, looking, you train. Have you been taking steroids? No, I've never taken a steroid. And I don't do drugs. I don't even smoke. I very rarely drink. Uh, so it came down to stress is the key issue, and how you deal with it. Um, so there we go. So that was the start of something that made me think I really have to change my life, because I couldn't go back to working in the city, which is what I was doing before, for a big organization, a highly stressful job. What am I going to do with my life? And
Big question.
a big question, because
Yeah.
I've always been driven. I've always had a career path. I've always said, go to university, graduate, work, have a good job, go up the career path, blah blah blah. But that was taken away from me. And what am I going to do? And then it starts playing. So the doctor says I went back to see my heart consultant and saying I'm not, all these side effects. You give me all the drugs. He goes, yeah, we can cure you physically, but we're great at sorting out the mechanics, but that's where we stop. Everything to do with the mind, they've got no idea, Alison. So what it was is that I ended up going through a really dark period. Didn't know what to do. They weren't allowing me to go back to work because of the second heart attack. I was stuck at home basically. And I'd been diagnosed I'd already been seen by a psychologist after my first heart attack, who said to me that everyone's got a certain personality type, and my personality type was AAA. So that is good and bad. It's good that you're very driven and motivated, but on the other hand, you have very high expectations and you expect a lot, not only of yourself but other people. But then I one of my failings is I have high levels of impatience, not only particularly of myself. And when you're stuck at home not doing what you should be doing, what I felt I should be doing, it has very negative consequences on your mind, and your behavior as a consequence. And then I started taking out on myself in the gym, but I had a bad back problem anyway. So frankly, what happened was I started training and being even more intense in the gym, and I always had a bad back problem. So in the end, I ended up having damaged my disc severely, but they couldn't do anything because I was on these medications. So no surgeon would wanted to operate on me. So I had this sciatic pain, and all the doctors did was feed me with opioids. So I ended up, another story. So obviously I didn't want to, and the impact on the family, they wanted to go on holiday, and I couldn't say no because I just couldn't. So then we ended up booking a flight to Mexico, and I had severe sciatic pain. A Mexico flight is about 10 hours.
That sounds
So
horrible.
sitting in an aeroplane.
Nightmare.
It's not what I would call a great experience for 10 hours, let alone when you have sciatic pain. And so what I did, and I had to just, the drug mixture I was on, so that people know. Let's see, and this is all prescribed, by the way. This is not illegal. So the doctors were feeding me with morphine and diazepam.
Right.
Um,
Even one of those is a bit, is a
and also the other opioids to just codeine. So that was a pretty heady mix. So that got me through Mexico, but I just don't have any memory of Mexico because you just don't. And but it was so bad I had to keep taking. I was waking up every 2 hours with pain, so they had to keep feeding me more. I had to keep taking tablets. In the end, the pain was so bad the surgeon did operate. So I had to have a discectomy, which is fusion of your discs. So yeah, I was in that made me even worse because then I couldn't train. So I can't train, can't do anything. I ended up, luckily, by chance, I ended up helping someone. My wife spotted an opportunity. A friend of hers said this gentleman who runs a charity at Parkinson's needed some help. So I ended up just visiting him, just to have a chat about him. Tom Isaacs, his name was. He ran Parkinson's UK, Parkinson's Trust, should I say. There's two main charities. His was Parkinson's Trust. And he had Parkinson's from mid-30s. Probably one of the most amazing guys I've ever met, frankly. He walked all across GB when he discovered he had Parkinson's to raise money. So that's several hundred miles, and he raised something like £500,000. And he was an amazing guy. He never let it stop him. So he set up this charity. But I became his mentor, basically. Cut a long story, and we could have another chat about how great he was and what he did. And I got really close to him in a very, very short space of time. And I ended up being his mentor and basic coach, but I didn't know that. He wanted to, he seemed to find value what I had to say to him. And it used to help him a lot. But unfortunately, tragically, he passed away quite unexpectedly, which is another big blow. But I ended up helping other charities, but in the end, I think there was a period in my life where I went through a really dark phase, and I didn't realize myself, but it was depression. And because of my background, I didn't want to seek help from anybody. I thought I could resolve it on my own because I'd always gone through life fixing problems. And this was yet another problem. But you don't really see the impact that you think you've changed, or you don't think you've changed, but you do. But it's other people, it's your family and your loved ones who see that more than you do. And you end up taking out on them, but you don't realize you're taking out on them. And in the end, I needed to seek help. to try and find a way through this. It took me several years though to understand this, and there's a lot of introspection, I guess. But one of the key lessons I've learned is you can't do it on your own. But I learned so many lessons through that period, and I guess this is where I thought, well, I've got to be able to. Well, I've gone, having come through those dark periods in life, and I ended up finding a lot of value helping others, Alison. So this is where, having gone through that dark period with my back and sciatic pain and the heart issues, and managed to stabilize those, and then to find what am I going to do with myself. And I guess the second heart attack, I had to wait 40 minutes for an ambulance. This is the point. It wasn't, the second heart attack wasn't just a second heart attack. I was there, and this is what really shaped what I needed to do with my life. I was waiting 40 minutes for an ambulance to arrive because, and this is quite controversial, on a Sunday, there's a lack of service. So whatever you do, everyone who's listening, do not get ill on a weekend, especially on a Sunday, and especially between lunch times, because apparently some of the ambulance crew were having their lunch. So while I was having the first heart attack, didn't really hurt. The second heart attack, it was probably the most painful period of my life. And every breath, it was like an elephant sitting on me. And during that time, not a lot I could do. I wish frankly, I wish I was dead, because I just couldn't breathe. I just couldn't do anything. Breathing in or out was so painful. But I really become quite philosophical in those moments. Quite in the dark sense of humor. You think, what are you doing to me? I am not very religious, but you come to think, well, you're still here. There's got to be a purpose for this. What are you on this planet for?
Wow.
Why are you still here? And that was the question I had to ask myself. And that was the turning point. I had to think,
Wow.
and that is why I've gone into, I didn't decide I wanted to be a coach. Someone said, why don't you keep helping people? Why don't you go into coaching? Because I used to help friends who'd been through dark periods for whatever reason, and they found a lot of value from my own experiences, and it used to help them. And similarly, I not volunteer, I'm involved in a major project at the British Heart Foundation. And they seem to get a lot of value listening to the scientists. As to the second time, I couldn't even climb a set of stairs, Alison. I got home from the second heart attack, having got fit from the first heart attack. I could not climb a set of stairs. And I had to stop halfway, out of breath, and thinking, here we go again. And it was very demoralizing. But I was determined, and I couldn't lift any weights. I had to start all over again from baby weights. But time is a great healer, because it's not where you are today. I used to think, so there's a lot of lessons, and one of them was, it doesn't matter where you are today, it's where you're going to be next month, in 3 weeks time, 6 weeks time, 8 weeks time. And that time soon flies, and that's what happens to your life. So people get stuck thinking today is their future. No, today is just a moment in time. It's gone. So where are you going to be the next moment, the next few moments, the next hour, day, month? It's up to you. Have that choice, Alison. And that's the decision, and that's the conclusion I came. I could either wallow in this pity and get angry at myself, but it's not my fault. But then how are you going to use this to add value and meaning to your life and to others? And I found a great way for me was to help others and use my experience. And this is how I got into resilience coaching, basically, because at the end of the day, it is about being resilient and finding solutions to your problems. But not only getting through those moments, those really dark moments, but what have you learned, and how can you enjoy and grow your life? And I love reading and looking at the books written by Holocaust survivors. The key message of those, such as Viktor Frankl, it's not only about survival at the Holocaust, but it's about adding meaning from those experiences to make, and you can grow and you become better for it. And it has enriched my life, because I've changed totally as a result, in a better way, although it hasn't been a linear journey. And at times it's been a very dark, and I have sunk very low. But I've learned from that, and I've come through the other side, hopefully. And I want to use that to help others. So that is a my history as to what's happened to me and how I've ended up going into coaching. Because I just feel I have a lot of I've learned a lot of things, and I want to use those messages and tools and techniques that have helped me. Then I feel a lot of other people can benefit from those, and coaching is the best way to do it. So I think you've learned a lot from your own story as well, haven't you?
Well, hang on a second, because like there's so much there. Like you've given me so much that I want to come back with. I think potentially we're going to be having another conversation at some point, because there's you and I could talk about this stuff forever. I suppose the first thing I wanted to say in response to this is, I mean, that's like a hugely powerful story. And we've talked a little bit about this, but not as in depth, because I really wanted to keep that for this conversation. So, but it was really interesting to hear more of the story of the heart attack as well. So, as you know, this is quite an emotive subject for me. As you know, my father passed away last year from a heart attack. He was 81 and had a lot of health issues at the time. So a very different sort of scenario. And it happened, luckily for us and for him, especially very quickly. Perhaps less so for us. It's whether, you never know quite which way around you want that, whether you want it to be quick for the person. But yeah, that's a conversation for another time as well. But just that, just how happy I am for you and your family, that for you it was, even though you were the 1 in 100, which is incredible, like story, that you are now where you are, and that you're turning it into something really positive in your life. And I think, well, I don't know whether there was even a choice. I think you seem like the kind of person that just would have happened anyway. So more power to you, and that's amazing. And also the work, with the Heart Foundation as well, I wanted to say about that, because again, my mum also has heart issues. She has a pacemaker, and so heart things are a big thing in our family. So again, like
okay, so I've got to interrupt you and say you've got to get yourself tested then.
Oh no,
because I think oh you have, okay.
Yeah.
Just to say, because that's one thing that came out of it. After my first heart attack, I said to my brother, you better get yourself tested, and luckily he did have a blockage,
right,
and he had to have a stent straight afterwards. So
wow, okay.
and so if I hadn't spotted that, so I guess if it hadn't happened to me, it was going to happen to him.
Yeah.
And then a year after, my mother had a heart attack. So it's
right.
really important for people to get tested if they're especially if so. Another message for this people listening here, that if you've any in your family have had a heart attack, your parents or siblings, make sure you or your children get tested as well, because there is a strong chance there is a connection.
Yeah, we had to, I can't remember the name of what my mom has, terrible these things, but my brother and I both had to have tests for that years ago. We were both fine. So but yes, that's a very good point in that respect. So yeah, gosh, so many things to talk about. But I guess that today's topic really is about, this thing of overcoming adversity and turning it into something good, which you've explained there for you, your journey with that. And I think it's lovely as well that you just, one can decide that they're going to go into something like coaching, but that was obviously a path for you that was there, and people were just reflecting back to you, this is, something that you'd be really good at. And then you've used your experiences. And I know in my coaching work, very much so, there's things that have happened in my past that I'm now drawing on and that are helping other people. So is that something that you regularly experience? I mean, even if it's not somebody with a health experience, but just, with a depression, because I've just, this last year really experienced my version of what like depression is. Absolutely. But for me now, I'm so grateful for that experience. At the time, it was horrendous, and it was about 8 or 9 months of probably the most challenging time in my life. Um, and I actually said to my lockdown flatmate the other day, I am, for the first time, I'm really grateful for that time. And he was with me through all of it pretty much. I'm the loss of my father is a little bit more like, not quite sure I'm ready to sound grateful. I mean, I've never sound grateful for that, but I'm nowhere near ready to say, that's okay now. I'm okay, and I'm still dealing with that. But there were other things that happened very quickly after my father passed away, that were really difficult at that time, and they were made so much harder because I was dealing with the loss of my father, who was my best friend since I was a doc. But yes, I can now say I am really grateful for the things that happened afterwards, because now I know my coaching work is going to be so much stronger and so much more powerful, because I can say, I can see what's going on there. I understand that. This is what's helped me. And I might not say it in that way, but I can pull on those things.
Well, exactly, because you can actually, being able to relate to people who come to you, either are you friends or potential coachees who want some help from you. One of the key issues is, can you actually relate to them?
Absolutely.
And if your life is full of experiences, not all good, and the dark moments are the ones that help to shape you, but those clients who come to you with their own darknesses, dark times and issues, you can relate very strongly to them, and they can see that. And it's very powerful, because coaching is not just, it's a lot of things, but one of them is to be able to align yourself with the feelings and emotions of that other person. And whether you, but there's no more powerful way of doing that than actually having gone through something very similar. So those of us who've been through dark, as such as yourself, who've been through those very, very dark moments, and then someone comes to you with their own story, you can relate very powerfully with that person. And that person then no longer feels alone, or and no longer feels that no one understands him or her.
Absolutely.
And because you've been there, and you can completely relate to that person. So without giving any advice, you can just, you're there with them.
Yeah, you're in that space with them, and there's that understanding.
And that alone is a great start for that person coming to you. They're not alone. And I think I felt deeply alone, because when I should say, well, when I had those issues with my second heart attack, trying to understand what was going on in my head. The problem is, at that time, having two heart attacks in your 40s was very, because I remember going into the hospital, I was in a ward, and I was alone. I felt so alone, because the ward was full of, no disrespect, people who were 70s and 80s and older. And here I was, and they were looking at me, what the hell is this person doing in our ward? I was in my, 42, 43, whatever, and they're in their 70s and 80s. And they're thinking, I felt like a fraud. What the hell am I doing here, taking up this precious bed? And that was one thing. And that was carried all the way through to the British Heart Foundation. And they couldn't deal with people who suffered at that time, who had problems in their 40s, physically, but also the mental side. I said, I'm struggling. Who can I talk to? They didn't have any mental health help for people at that time. And that caused me to feel even more alone and helpless. Who am I supposed to turn to then? If the British Heart Foundation couldn't help me, and they specialize in people who have heart attacks, they couldn't understand what I was going through. Who was going to understand what I was going through then? And luckily, I believe that has now changed. And I had a discussion with the chief executive of the British Heart Foundation, actually, who apologized, who gave me a personal apology for that, because he said to me at that time, we didn't know any better, and things are a lot more different. But he had he was big enough to admit that that even the charity didn't have the resources or wherewithal to think of how to support people, because at that time mental health wasn't it doesn't have the the prominence, shall we say, that it does today. At those days, it was still, you kept it to yourself.
Well, you said,
even
you said how you found it, that you felt like you needed to fix it yourself, and I think that's a very common thing. I know I felt very much last year like I should be able to deal with this. I should be able to sort this because I do all this. You okay there?
Oh, sorry, I'm having. This is very awkward. I thought I'd plugged in my laptop, and I hadn't. So hang on, while I completely destroy your video.
That's fine. That's all
That's
good.
all right. You try and edit me out. All right, now we're back on power. So
sorry.
Your
battery was going. No, that's fine.
That's all right. This is what happens with the live recording. All right.
That's all good.
I've now changed colour, by the way.
No, you look the same. But I forgot what I was saying. So,
oh, apologies. No, you were talking about mental health, and it was a dark period.
Yes, and about coping on your own. That's right. And I remember my version of that last year was, well, I've just spent the last 5 years like transforming my life with NLP and making these incredible changes and blah blah blah, but I couldn't shift it. There was something for me with the depression of it was very different to dealing with physical things that were going on in my body. So or like mindset changes or things like that I've been working with like in really powerful ways and very significant life-changing ways for 5 years. And then suddenly I was at one point I was, because I often live in a van by choice, but at that time it was in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of lockdowns, and I was suddenly found myself, I couldn't be with my family because I just spent I think like 6 or 7 weeks packing up my mum and dad's home, because we then knew very quickly that my mum, because of mobility issues, was going to live with my brother's family, and they've got a setup where they're going to build an independent annex, so that's all going to be great. But we had to sell the house very quickly, so I spent 6 or 7 weeks on my own packing that up in my hometown, when none of my friends could come and help me, because if they'd have come and helped me, then I couldn't have gone back and forth to my mum because she's 81 and we were shielding. So I had to do that on my own and then pack the house up, and I made the decision to show my mum everything on FaceTime so that she could decide. And I mean everything in that house, pretty much, attic to every single room. So it was a very intense process. Anyway, did that, left, and then proceeded to have a full-on breakdown, and at that time a relationship that was very significant in my life, not like a lifelong forever, this is my person forever kind of relationship, but somebody who was very significant in my life. That relationship went through a bit of a bumpy ending time, which was unexpected in the way it happened, but it was just timing of everything. It was always going to happen at some point with us, but it happened right then, and not quite the way we'd anticipated that it would, for different reasons. But yeah, the breakdown then just went, and I was then in my van. It was raining all the time. It suddenly started raining after a year of sunshine, and then I was going to have an operation and find out figure a way to have an operation while living in a van. And amazing people came into my life and helped me deal with all of that. But I just remember being like, why can't I fix this? I had 24 years, as you know, of illness with ME, and I was bedbound for much of that time, and I was in a wheelchair for a lot of that time. And I turned my life around by rewiring my brain over a long 18 months of time. But I remember very, very well, it was like the first day of the course that I did, this NLP CBT mix of things that I did, called the lightning process. If anyone's listening, highly recommend it. And if anyone is listening and is interested, drop me a message and I can talk to you about that. I know some good people that train that. So but yes, so I did that, and I remember it was almost an instant change, but it took 18 months before I was like, yeah, I'm now really good and I'm well. And I just remember last year going, why can't I fix myself? I got out of a wheelchair, this is crazy. I got myself into a dentist chair when I was paralyzed with fear, and I managed to, I have these things that I do that just, but I couldn't shift this real deep depression. And I know, like, when I look back, I think, okay, well, I lost my dad, significantly, the most, my dad and my mum, most, my brother and my family and my niece and Kirsten, his partner, but my dad was always that, like, real significant, solid structure in my life. He'd gone, my family home had gone, which I lived in for most of my adult life when I was ill. I just packed it up as well. That's a huge deal to do on your own, especially. And then this significant other man in my life, who, while he was never going to be there as my romantic partner forever, we always thought we were going to be in each other's lives. He'd gone, the home with that, I'm living in a van, and then the operation was to have an ovary removed. So I was like, now I'm losing an ovary. It's just like, there was all these things. So I think, when we go through times like that, I mean, those sorts of things, like, on their own are enough, but when you look at them all in one go with a pandemic on top, you're going to have a really hard time. You're just going to fall apart. And I remember at one point biting my nails so badly that they were bleeding, and I was still biting them. I was looking at them and there was blood on my cuticles, and I was still biting them because the anxiety was so extreme. And I got to the point where I had to say, well, my mum, God bless her, many, many calls, thank God for FaceTime, because one feels so alone. And I didn't have a family, as you were saying, that for you it was affecting your family. I was on my own. I was going between friends that I could go to at that time, but my experience of that was very different, because it was only affecting me. But it was, I was looking at my nails and there was blood on not just one finger but a bunch of fingers, and I was still biting them. So I called the doctor and I said, look, I can't do that, there's something that I can't deal with here. I can't fix this. But I could just remember that real, like, sense of, I should be able to sort this out. I should be able to fix this. But what I can remember very clearly was the brain work that I do, these, like, NLP techniques and all that kind of stuff. Before the depression, when I would do them, it was like they would be able to latch on to something. There was something there that they could attach to and then do their work. And what it felt like, I was throwing all this stuff at them that I would normally do, but it was like there was nothing there for them to hold on to. There was something had gone, this, like, I know you're a big fan of resilience. For me at that time, resilience was the word. That was, when I was having my life coaching, it was about self-worth, the loss of, or the lack of feeling, or my awareness of my self-worth. Because, as my coach said one day when I said to him, so how do I get my self-worth to, and he was like, I can't give you that. It's already in you. You're just not seeing it at the moment. I was like, yeah, okay. That's really cool. Yeah, it is in me. I just can't see it. So we were, like, uncovering it by the work we were doing. But resilience was such a big word at that time. Of that's what I felt had gone, was my resilience had just been dismantled through this process of, so through these weeks of really, really challenging things all in a row. And then it was about, okay, right, how do I now start to put this back together? How do I find my way back out of this? And medication was, I had to say, I'm very, because I had so many years of illness and I was on all kinds of medication over the years. None of them helped the illness I had. They would help with pain relief, things like that, codeine. Morphine was the thing at the time. But I'm very, that for me is a last resort. But my mum knows this. She was a nurse for her entire life. So we've had many conversations about this, but I got to that point where I was like, no, this is the time where I have to say, I want to function. I want to get my life back. I don't want to spend too much longer like this. I have to go through this now. I'm grieving for my dad, grieving for relationship, and we're all grieving for the loss of our world. Just that, the pandemic of, even if we're having an okay time and there's no crises going on, there's a grief of some kind for all of us. So yeah, it was like that. I remember ringing the doctor. I was floods of tears at the time, and just told him everything. Pop me on medication. And yeah, the medication was what I needed to help me find my feet. And I can remember over that little period of time, maybe over a month or so, just starting to feel this, almost like this, yeah, it did feel like a skin kind of coming back, like a thickness, or maybe the skin had just gone really like like a, you know, a dead leaf in winter, but the skin was coming back. And then the work, my self-work that I was doing, my self-coaching, my techniques, all of those things started to be able to connect and then work, and then gradually, you know, it's a process, isn't it? It's not a quick one. But yes, I just, yeah, that was, you know, you talking about the depression for you, and about how that was kind of a hard thing to, yeah.
But at the time, you can't see a way out, I guess. But
No.
looking back, but then you don't realize the significance. I mean, you know, what you've just said, Alison, you've went through what they say is, you know, when you lose somebody is a, what are the biggest
Yeah.
causes of stress in life?
Yeah.
You either one of them is death,
Yeah.
the other one is moving house,
Yeah.
and the other is divorce or separation or loss of in a relationship. And so you had
triple hitter.
you had a
And the,
triple loss
and the pandemic.
and the pandemic, which you know, so frankly, that's what we call a worst case scenario, and you had to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
But I mean, who, the fact that you've been able to pull yourself, not pull yourself together, but pull through that, is amazing and very powerful. But at the time, it was immensely difficult for you, and at the time, you probably didn't feel you could find a solution. And you talk about a skin, it's probably a regrowth, a rebirth. You had a rebirth,
I feel like,
basically, out of, it's like, you know, you're at your very lowest ebb, and that was, and then you sort of risen again, as it were, because you found a way to deal with those traumas and the grief, and you've decided you've had enough. um but again, it's a very slow process. It's not something that happens overnight, that you think, and I'll be better, I'm really ill today and I'm really low, and then tomorrow I'm going to be better. It is, I think people need to understand, there's no magic cure, and it's not going to happen within a week or two. But if you stick at it, the the possibilities are there. And when you come out the other side, looking back, and at the time you think it's going to take forever, but looking back, the time just went by. It's just over. But I can see when you're immersed in it, it does. Perception of time, this is what it is. People think it's never going to end, but again, you have to give yourself analogies, and mindfulness is they talk about that, don't they, about when you're going through a dark period, you have to, the analogy, one of them is either you're sitting on a riverbank and watching a leaf or something float by, or a dark cloud, and that cloud passes, because clouds do, if you ever look up, don't you, and just seeing how the cloud, big dark cloud, is right in front of you, then a few minutes later it's over there, then it's gone out of sight. And that's the same with your emotions and feelings and what you're going through, Alison. But you've got a really powerful story to tell,
well, I think,
and good for you.
thank you.
And kudos.
Kudos, I love that word. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, like, I can remember even like 2 months ago, you know, well, I think this is a really important thing to talk about, is the thing of when you're in it. You know, it's great for us to be able to sit here now and say, you know, these things happened, but now we're in this place. And I'm very grateful for both of us that we're able to say that. But we have both been in that place. You know, when I'm talking about you looking at, you not just made your nail bleed, stop bleeding. I was actually carrying on biting my nails. It was so bad. So you've had 2 heart attacks. You know, we've genuinely both been in that place, and it is very difficult. I remember that being one of the hardest things, and probably one of the things that pulled the depression down even more, was the looking forward and just seeing I don't even know what I was seeing. I was just seeing, I don't, maybe I wasn't seeing anything. It was just dark. It was just black. And, I had 24 years of illness with this ME. And as I said, many years of being bedbound and then in a wheelchair. I was going out, and I wanted to be a rock climbing instructor when I was a teenager. So for me, that was a huge loss at that time, and for a long time. But for some reason, I think over that time, I did definitely have periods of a depression of some kind. But I think it was such a long thing, and it was so mixed up with physical illness as well. Whereas this last year, excuse me, I was physically perfectly fit, like the healthiest I've ever been in my life. So it was just pure mental depression, emotional depression. And I can
yeah, sorry, no, I didn't mean to butt in, but I mean, I want to capture this point that your physical well-being and your mental well-being, there is a definite link, a very strong link.
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about the heart attack, it really, I was really aware that, you were talking about having something that, I've luckily never experienced anything even remotely like that. But I know that heart attacks have a massive impact on the body, when you're recovering. But the emotional impact of that as well, and the mental impact of what was going, when you talk about the second one, where your body was experiencing this horrendous pain, but your mind was also having this like questioning thing of like, all right, what am I going to do in my life? Like, what is this about? That's two completely.
Well, yeah, because the doctors also, when you think you're fixed, that's the thing, you see. This is what the psychological trauma from the second one, I was promised after the first one, that you're fixed because you're on all this medication. So now that I've been diagnosed with an illness after the first heart attack, serious coronary artery disease. Here's the tablets, take those and you'll be fine. Okay, well, I did. And then 18 months later, I ended up having a second heart attack. So it tells me that, the science cannot fix, it's no guarantee.
No.
So there we go. Your fragility is, you feel even more fragile because you're just thinking, you're on tablets, you think, okay, I can live a life, but you can't because you just disproved your own theory that tablets and you're going to be safe. But I'm not safe. I wasn't safe, was I? So what are you going to do now? So it taught me a few lessons again. But it made me go into another reason for my mental spiral, because I didn't know from day to day what was going to happen to me, and you could let that really mess with your brain and your day-to-day life, because you think you can get scared of life.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens. You get scared to do anything because of what's happened.
Yeah.
So you let the past determine what's going to happen to you tomorrow and thereafter and the next month. So you end up doing nothing. There's a danger of you doing nothing.
Yeah.
But then that's a vicious spiral, because you do nothing, then your mental health that deteriorates, and that again. So you've got your health issues, your physical issues, and then compound that with your mental issues. It can be a very dark period, undoubtedly, for sure. But and so I totally relate. So for me, and for you, the fact that you've managed to cure, there's a correlation between the stability of your physical health and how you can then use that stability and then start to help with your mental. So both play an important part for me now as to going forward. I need to make sure, daily exercise, looking after my body physically, and doing stuff like fresh air and, simple things like that are really important for me, for not only to keep myself fit, but mentally fit as well. And I don't know if it's the same for you, and how again, you mentioned rock climbing, and that's a really important part of your life now, isn't it?
Well, when I haven't rock climbed obviously with the pandemic, so for almost a year, bit here and there when we were allowed out, but but the 2 years before, when I was rock climbing all the time, I didn't have any crises or anything difficult going on in my life. Life was, for the first time in my life, healthy, fit, mentally well. I was just enjoying my life, and I was learning how to live, and I was traveling, and I was for climbing, and with my climbing partner at the time, and we were just, you know, just climbing, and that was it. It was great. Whereas now, I think this last year for me has just been incredibly important. Again, the stuff with my dad is a whole separate thing, but that is an important part of life as well, losing, you know, significant people. So, but that's a different, you know, go too off topic with that. But the rest of this year has been very important for me in a different way. Like that time was very free, and it was about, as I say, learning how to live. This friend of mine who was my climbing partner, you know, we were traveling a lot, and of course I was like a little kid, like in an airport, going, "Oh my god!" It's like a 10-year-old, like traveling for the first time, and he was very much about helping me. You know, he knew my history and that this was like me actually just finding my feet in the world, and was very, you know, right, you get us through departures. Go on, like I did it last time. It's your turn. I'd be like,
Yeah.
So that was about that. Whereas this last year has been growing on a much deeper level. And I think you said something earlier that I thought, yeah, no, that I understand that. Like I'm the same person that I was, but I'm a much stronger person than I was before my dad. I always, to me, it's like it was the moment I heard my mum on the phone, 8 o'clock in the morning, saying, "Darling, I need to tell you something. Dad's in hospital." You know, that moment, anything was like, you know, BC, like BD before Dad, and I just, I just feel like I'm now. Maybe I got physically well for those 2 years, and I found my physical feet, and now I found finding, because it's obviously an evolving, ongoing process, but I'm finding my emotional feet and my sense of self and all those things which will, you know, inform my coaching and enable me to be a much better coach. And you know, I think I would have been all right before, but I think now it's like, well, no, I can.
Well, because you've been through so many things in life, Alison, when things happen to you now, you're able to look back and say to yourself and have those internal conversations, well, I've been through something a lot worse.
Yeah.
If you've been through that and you've come through the other side, whatever else happens in your life cannot really compare.
Well,
so
yes, my mum reminds me.
And it puts it into perspective. And I guess that's what it is. A lot of the issues we face, are they, not to belittle them, but sometimes we attach far more significance to them than they actually are. Again, because those are all to do with, again, we can have another conversation about the importance of thoughts.
Yeah.
It's about retraining those thoughts and what importance you give to those thoughts. And you shouldn't give any. It's our behaviors are determined by our thoughts, aren't they?
Yeah.
And if you keep having a mental chatter about those, and the same thought patterns keep going over and over in your head, of course you're going to have if you have negative thoughts all the time, you're going to be in that frame of mind, and your behavior and your emotions and your feelings are all going to be related. So you've got to change your thought patterns. And I guess being through those dark behaviors, dark moments, teaches you a lot about those thoughts that you were having. So what I'm saying is, now if those things happen to you, you can understand, you're probably a lot more aware of what's going on.
Yes.
And then you can change those thought patterns.
Yeah.
Because you remember what's happened to you before, and how you used to behave, and what thoughts you used to have, and the results they had, which were probably not great. This is what I do. So I definitely use those lessons to help me cope with other things that go on, and put things into perspective.
I think that's definitely a conversation we can come back to and have. It's endless, isn't it? There was one thing I just wanted to go back to, because it just occurred to me it could be a helpful way for people to look at this. Is we were talking about when you're in the dark place and you can't see anything outside of it, and it just feels like that's it. I mean, you know, I remember knowing that it would get better at some point, but you can't know then when. You don't know when that moment's going to happen. You're just hoping it's going to be soon. And maybe it's a similar thing to when I was saying about the self-worth that my coach said to me, you know, I can't give you your self-worth, it's already in you, you're just not seeing it. And it just occurred to me that that's, you know, it's the same thing. It's like the future, or your potential, or the things that you're potentially going to do, your abilities to do things, your future. It's there. You just can't see it. But it's not that it's not there. It's just that you're just at the moment, you've just got this blanket, you've got this whatever it is, this wall around you. But it is out there.
It is baby steps. I mean, when I was in my darkest moments, but to try and help me get through those, I try and do something or give myself something to look forward to.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And you know, it could be the smallest thing. It could be, oh, I want to, there's this movie coming on the TV, or this cinema movie. If you're into films, find something that you like, or even if it's just, you know, if you like going, if you're able to go, and in those days when we could go and visit, or go and see a gig or theatre, whatever it is, or even have a meal, or but when you're in a dark moment, I guess that's not something you want to do. But even if it's just do something for yourself that in the future that is nice, even if it's, you know, you cook yourself a nice meal, or you have something nice to eat, or something that really, you know, you like. What is it that can just, you used to look forward to, or just have something, and no matter how small it is, that can just make your day a bit better.
The only thing I did before Christmas, well, after Christmas, when I was in probably the darkest patch of the actual depression, but the crises were over, but I was just left in this real sort of depression, anxiety time. I was barely getting out of bed. If it was before midday, it was, you know, amazing. If it was 2 o'clock, that was quite common. And then the rest of the day was shot. But the one thing every day I did was I cooked a meal in the evening, but it wasn't just a meal. It was like something from scratch. So I made this my focus, where I got a recipe app, you know, and I started planning meals. I started finding these things that I've always wanted to cook, but I've never, you know, had the time to do. And I do the online, you know, the click and collect thing, because you know, we still couldn't go out. And that was like every day, pretty much. Maybe there was a couple of days in those 2.5, 3 months where maybe I didn't, or we got to take away. But yeah, and I was cooking food that I never was like, this is really good. And my housemate was just like, yeah, you stay depressed, you know, like seriously, it was really good.
Didn't that make you feel good? How did that make you feel then?
It made me, it was amazing. It was like, I knew that every day, no matter how bad the day was, no matter how bad I was feeling, or all of it, and knowing that the next day would be the same, there was just this point of focus of the day where I knew that at some point I was gonna start to create something. I'm, you know, I was a photographer for years. I'm a very creative person, so I think that really appealed to me. But I was producing something, and they were things that were way outside of my thinking that I would cook, you know. And now I'm like, all right, I've now got those. I know I can like whip up this like bolognese that's going to actually blow your mind. You know, the smell is insane, and all these other things. So yeah, I think that was a really, really helpful thing. And I also know how hard it is to, you know, so you know, if you're depressed and someone's saying, well, just do something nice for yourself, it's like, I'm, you know, like I'm not even getting out of bed. I understand, you know, I've been there as well, and I think
I totally get it. I mean, sometimes, so I'm saying it can be even, sometimes you just have to, it's really difficult, but to try and force yourself to do it, like you forced yourself maybe to cook every evening. It's an effort, and I guess the easiest thing is to just stay where you are and do nothing. But again, for me, to get myself out of that hole, I needed to find something to look forward to. And even if it was just, and you know, even if it's wearing something, smells, sights, even if it's just going in the garden or going for a walk, and just listening to the birds. It's the most, it could be the smallest things in nature that can really have, for me, they had a really big impact, just to appreciate and be grateful. I think gratitude is, something that's really important for me as well. And I think it does help to just, no matter how bad you think you are, when you see some people who are really suffering as well, and what their lives are like,
Absolutely.
it does have a major impact. But then, even, yeah, for me, so just living, so many small things made a big difference to me, Alison.
Well,
But yeah,
I was going to say, shall we do our regroup and come up with
yeah,
our things to, what do we call them? Our takeaways from this.
takeaways.
Yeah,
Yes,
let's do
that
that.
would be good.
And then we'll come back in, well, it'll be in the middle of this little fade. So it'll be a few minutes, but it'll be.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, well, let's not. Oh, hang on. Oh, I could just pop recording.
Okay.
Hey, cool, and we're back.
Hello.
So we just had a little conversation, and we've come up with 3 little takeaways that we feel, well, from what our longer conversation was, would be perhaps helpful to other people, to summarize. So, Vipan, do you want to go with the first one?
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, I would suggest not letting today define your future. So, in the midst of having a bad period, you got to, for me, what I used to say to myself was, this will not determine my future tomorrow, the next month, or thereafter, and just accepting today for what it is, but it will go away, and it's only a temporary blip. It doesn't have to be, it is not permanent. Why should it be? And it happens to everybody. So having that thought process was really important for me.
I think it's also about trusting as well, isn't it? That, like, whatever you trust in, or if you don't have any sort of, if it's just your own trust in yourself, but just trusting that, as you say, life will change, and you might not, well, you won't know at that point when it's going to change. And this is what we were saying earlier, neither of us knew when our lives were going to start to turn into a more positive, healthy direction, but at some point it will. And by just holding on to that trust as well as
yeah, have faith in that. I think that's really important to try. And it's really difficult when you're in the deepest, darkest storms of your life, thinking I can't see a way out of this. But everything changes, things change. It's like the weather, it's like the seasons. You've got to believe in that, though. And even, having gone through similar, we've both gone through a lot of grief, and at the time it seems never ending, ceaseless, the pain, the raw emotions of it. But looking back on it for myself, things have changed, and they do change. So
just sort of another really helpful thing as well that I use as well is, I mean, currently at the moment everything's okay, but during this difficult time and other times in my life, when I look back at previous difficult times, it's like, okay, well, it didn't stay like that. That was really difficult. Okay, I was ill for 24 years. That was a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm now not ill. So it's like I can see there's proof in my past that whatever's difficult now isn't going to stay the same. It will change. So that's quite a helpful little tool that I use just to remind myself of, like, God, I remember that felt horrendous at that time, but it lasted a week, it lasted a year, whatever. But I'm not still in that place.
Well, exactly. I think it's really powerful, actually, to realize and go back when you're going through a dark period, to try and see what else has happened in your life that you've managed to overcome. And use that as evidence to yourself that you can get through this. You've done it before, you can do it again.
Exactly.
I think that's pretty powerful. Yeah.
I'm glad I remember that, because that's just something of this last year I particularly sort of gone, oh, hang on a second, this feels horrendous, but it's felt horrendous before. Okay, so the second one, we were talking about just, you know, as a practical thing as well of, and we, as we said earlier, we both know how difficult this is, so we're not just being like, oh, it's just think about something, you know, just do something nice for yourself. You know, we know how hard it is when you're in that really dark place to do this, but if you're able to just do at least one thing a day, more if you're able to, and if you can, and you know, it depends on where you're at. But if it's a really, really bad dark place, just doing one thing, and it could be tiny. We were talking about, you said earlier, you just sometimes just the smell of aftershave, just, you know, kind of a self-care thing as well, isn't it? Or it could just be, I was saying, smelling some basil. I had some basil growing in the kitchen. Just smelling that, it would just shift me into a, you know, it wouldn't fix anything, but it would just shift my mental state, and it would shift me into a slightly different place. And
Yeah.
for me, it was the cooking as well, which was a bigger thing. But that was a really dark depression. But that just became my focus point, and it got me. I knew every day I was going to be out of bed. I was going to be creating something, and then I'd go back to bed or whatever it was. You know, just having that focus point.
It is, but it gave you something to look forward to. That was one
Yeah,
thing, that what you were
absolutely.
doing for yourself. But also, I mean, this isn't sort of you and I having some sort of hocus pocus, let's feel good type
No,
things. These, you know, we were saying, you know, that there is scientific evidence that
yeah,
when you do something nice, you can change the neural pathways in your brain, and scientists have been able to measure this. And those neural pathways, which dopamine and stuff that can make change your feelings and responsible for giving a little bit of pleasure, they change your mood.
yeah,
So the fact that you can either, you know, for me it was whether I listen to a great piece of music, or go for just enjoy being out in the fresh air and listening to the birds or whatever. Just just those things change change my thoughts, and the neural pathways get changed, so I do feel a bit better, so your mood shifts.
yeah.
So
As well,
it's just
it's yeah,
realizing that it's not just doing things. There are actual scientific reasons that as evidence to can help you, that
yeah.
there's method to our madness, as it were.
Yes, I
So
like that.
yeah. So
Yes. Well, I'm
we might be both two eccentric something or others, but you know,
well,
I'm pretty speak for yourself, but yeah, but I assure you, they
yeah,
you'll find something, and it could be anything. It's whatever works for you. You know, for me, even if I wear a lilac jumper,
yes, whatever
it
floats your
could
boat.
exactly whatever floats your boat. Yeah,
Well,
exactly
and I
true.
was saying about the smiling thing as well, which is another really, if you're this does sound mad crazy if you're not if you haven't heard things like this before, but when you're in a really dark depression or even just a bit depressed, just putting your face into the smiling position will change the neural pathways in your brain, and your brain chemistry will have you thinking that, oh, this, you're smiling, that means you are happy, blah 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 blah. So I did that at a time when I was depressed once for a week. I had an experiment of walking around with this like Joker smile on my face, you know, like, and it was a different time, wasn't the one I was talking about earlier, but it was a different time, and I just felt that it was almost like I then, you know, my shoulders went back, and it's like I started to embody um that happiness of some kind that my brain was thinking that I was telling it we are, by putting my face into this smile. So that's another one. It's a bit weird when you're in a really dark place, but
And there's science to prove
try.
that as well, you know, Alison, that you know,
It
you
is. Yeah,
tell your brain
exactly.
sees that you're happy, or you've
Yeah,
put on this smiley face. So it visualizing is a really powerful way, because the brain doesn't know
absolutely.
unless you give it tell it what to thinking. So
And it's like the
but yeah,
confidence thing as well, like where, you know, yeah, we can have another conversation about this sometime.
yeah, true,
But the
yeah,
whole,
yeah,
you know, like when you're not feeling confident and you just you feel like this, you know, just sit upright, put your shoulders back, like lift your head up, and it's like you
yeah,
feel like your brain starts going, okay, okay, we're confident because this is what we do when we're
yes,
confident.
exactly.
It's,
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely part of that. But that's why I love the bit about smiling. I always watch comedy. So
yeah,
for me, you watch half an hour of comedy and you start smiling and laughing, and then automatically, even if you're feeling pretty pretty rotten beforehand.
Yeah.
The fact is that you get into the comedy and you find something amusing, that automatically shifts from whatever you were thinking about beforehand, and now you're involved in watching the comedy, and the fact that you're smiling and laughing automatically makes you feel a bit better.
Cool. So our last takeaway is 2 techniques. So you're going to give one, I'm going to give one. So you go.
Yeah, I think for me, I like to think of a little mantra, something you say to yourself over and over if you're going through a difficult period or a difficulty in a particular moment. So for me, the one I used to do and I still do is to say to myself, "This will pass." Because as we talked about earlier, whatever darkness or difficult moment you're going through, it isn't permanent. You've been through many before, as we've already talked about. I've talked about. It's just a phase. It's just a moment. It will go away. So to reinforce that, I say to myself, "This will pass." It's like, if you're into mindfulness or meditation, it's watching a dark cloud pass. It's just over your head at the moment, but it's not going to stay there. It will pass. So for me, over and over, saying that again, it does help me just put things into perspective. Whatever difficulty is, it just says, look, it's not as big as you think it is. You've been through worse, and whatever problem, it's transitory. It will pass, and that helps. It just helps me to calm down a bit. It helps my breathing, and I feel I can put things into perspective much better that way.
Yeah,
that's my little tip anyway.
It's a good reminder, isn't it? Which we do need reminding when we're in that stress state or depressed state. So mine is a physical technique of, and again, it's kind of a mindfulness practice, but I like to put my attention into my feet. So even if I'm sitting, I'm standing, or I could be lying on the bed, but just taking my awareness. So this is something that takes some practice. And if you've ever done body scanning, that will help you to get there quicker. But essentially, you're just focusing your mind on your feet. And I've been doing this for years, so I can do it very quickly. But I remember I would just have to go there, and then I'm somewhere else. So you just keep taking your mind back to it until it's almost like the rest of your body, you can still feel it, it still exists, but it's like almost like your feet become like cartoon feet in terms of the sensing of them, that sort of, the energy. And I find it's just really grounding. So if I'm in a really, if I'm in an anxious place, if I'm catastrophizing, particularly, especially when I'm in a depressed state, that tends to be a time where you catastrophize. That can just bring you back to the moment, and just ground you, which I think is really important as well. It just reminds you as well that who you are, because I often find as well that I get lost in all the chaos, all the stress, all the anxiety, all the depression. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, is, within my coaching work, it's about just separating, just gaining that sense of separation, so that you know where you begin and it ends, rather than you don't know. And there's a romantic version of that. This is the non-romantic version of that. But yes, so taking my attention into my feet and just feeling that connection with the floor, or whatever it is that wherever I am. Okay, well, hopefully that's helpful for some people out there. I know that all those things have been very helpful to me over the time, things that you've done and I've done. So yeah,
and I think we've got lots of other things that we could talk about, haven't we? So
you and I,
but I guess that's for another conversation. But I'm hoping we can actually if we've got one message, I guess it's out of all that conversation we've had, if something that just sparks something in somebody, that would be amazing, I think, for me.
Well, and it's just sharing, isn't it? And it's like, as we were saying earlier, you go through these really difficult times, they teach you things, but hopefully they can help someone else as well. And I think obviously we're coaches, so we're going to be able to use that in our coaching practice, but just with our friends and family, and just by
we both feel really passionate about this. That's what we're trying to do now, aren't we, with our coaching? Help others get through this.
Exactly. And what better thing to get from it? So it's wonderful that it helps you, and helps you grow, but to be a light help someone else and see them make shifts as well. I mean, that's just priceless.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you sharing your story, you know, about the heart attacks as well, and in such depth as well, and the depression particularly. Yeah, I'm just grateful for you to share that with us.
No, pleasure. It was I really enjoyed it, and
Good. Not too painful.
Funnily enough, no, the real thing was a lot worse.
That's another conversation for another time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, oh, this is like, you know, let's do it, but okay. But you've been brilliant, and you've been great, and it's been great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Alison. You're welcome.
Cool. All right. Well, I will see you again soon. And yeah. All right.
Cheers, Alison.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
So if you would like more information about the topics that we've talked about today, which have essentially been adversity and depression, you can contact me on alisonpetty.com. And I'm also going to put Vipan's link in as well. So if you want to have a conversation with him, you are very welcome to do that. I know he would love that as well. And if there's any topics of conversation that you would love to have discussed on this YouTube channel and podcast, just drop me a message. You can do that via my website. There's a contact form on there. Send me a message and let me know what you'd like me to have conversations about with other people. I've got quite a lot coming up in the future, which I'm really excited about. Topics like imposter syndrome, more about social media and the anxiety around social media, one about the meaning of home. So it's basically on what it means to be human. So yeah, get in touch, and I look forward to hearing from you.